Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, April 10th, 2020. The coronavirus filing delay gives us a glimpse of the future. Now, this is from the IRS website, quoting now. The 2019 income tax filing and payment deadlines for all taxpayers who file and pay their federal income taxes on April 15, 2020, are automatically extended until July 15, 2020. This relief applies to all individual returns, trusts, and corporations. This relief is automatic. Taxpayers do not need to file any additional forms or call the IRS to qualify. This relief also includes estimated tax payments for the year 2020 that are due on April 15th. Penalties and interest will begin to accrue on any remaining unpaid balances as of July 16th, 2020. You will automatically avoid interest and penalties on taxes paid by July 15th. Individual taxpayers who need additional time to file beyond the July 15th deadline can request a filing extension by filing Form 4868 through their tax professional, tax software, or by using the free file link on irs.gov. Businesses who need additional time must file Form 7004, end of quote. Now let's look at the history of the U.S. income tax. Almost no living American remembers life before the 16th Amendment and the federal income tax. The 16th Amendment was ratified in February of 1913, over 107 years ago, and the first income tax law was passed later in the same year. Now, this was not the first federal income tax. President Lincoln included a 3% tax on incomes over $800 in the 1861 Revenue Act. Now, this was an emergency measure brought on by the Civil War and was allowed to expire in 1872. According to an excellent article published on the History Channel website by Patrick Kiger, demands for an income tax by populist Democrats came up again during the Panic of 1893, which caused a quarter of the labor force to lose their jobs. The argument was that the tariffs and excise taxes being used to finance the federal government at the time were putting an undue burden on struggling workers and farmers. In 1894, legislation was passed that created a 2% tax on incomes above $4,000. In Pollock v. Farmers Loan and Trust Company, the Supreme Court declared that tax was unconstitutional in a 5-4 vote. Now, President Taft and some other Republicans apparently felt that it would help them get tariff and corporate tax reform if they supported an income tax constitutional amendment that they thought would never be ratified by the states. So, in 1909, Congress passed the 16th Amendment and sent it to the states for ratification. To the surprise and dismay of many who thought that ratification was impossible, the 16th Amendment achieved ratification in 1913, and a federal income tax law was enacted later that same year. Until Milton Friedman's emergency war measure was passed in 1943, Americans calculated, filed tax returns, and paid any federal tax owed on March 1st of the following year. Then the filing and payment date was moved to March 15th, and then in 1955 to April 15th. Now, because of the virus, the filing and payment deadline is July 15th this year. However, because of withholding, this extension makes little financial difference to most Americans. They've already paid most of their federal income taxes they owe through withholding. Now let's look at the first 1040 form. Now, an actual image of the nation's first 1040 form is included in the printed version of this chairman's report published on FAIRtax.org if you'd like to go look at it. But for our purpose here, I'll tell you the only thing that form has in common with today's 1040 is the form number. The original was quite simple, just one page. You filled in your name and address, some basic income information, calculated your tax at 1%, and you were done. Now, of course, this is how it worked before the federal income tax changed from being an income-generating resource to being a control mechanism and a way to reward the ruling class's friends at everyone else's expense. In conclusion, almost everyone is in favor of these fair tax benefits. More higher-paying U.S. jobs, more U.S.-based manufacturing, much less tax evasion than the $900 billion projected for this year. Social Security and Medicare become solvent. Every American is able to see the cost of the federal government on every receipt. You get the ability to calculate on a napkin what government programs cost each of us. There are no federal income tax returns to file with a fair tax and no withholding. You bring home 100% of what you earn. Now, none of the above benefits are available to the same extent under the existing income payroll tax system that allows a select few to profit while the rest of us pay. Future generations will look at the present income payroll tax system and wonder how anyone could have thought that a monstrosity like that would work for the people. Of course, Thomas Edison said, "This problem, once solved, will be simple." Now, more and more of us are beginning to see that the fair tax, the solution to the problem, is simple. We just need to use our great numbers to overthrow the current income payroll tax system that has condemned so many of us to a lesser quality of life. Now, no one would argue that drinking contaminated water is bad for your body. In like manner, it's equally bad to allow the corrupt income payroll tax system to contaminate our finances, especially when there's a much better, fairer, and simpler way to fund the federal government. Now, if you're ready to take back control of our government from a small group of corrupt people and to regain the ability for all to prosper, go to FAIRtax.org and join us. Then, contact your member of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.